The disturbance reached Padre Pio differently this time. It was not sudden. It was not external. It was a quiet accumulation pressing against his awareness like water rising slowly in a sealed room. As he knelt in prayer, he felt it. Heaviness. Not his own. Someone else's burden, multiple burdens, layered and unresolved, carried for so long they had become invisible to those who bore them. The vision opened. Padre Pio saw people praying. Countless souls, scattered across the world, kneeling in churches, sitting in quiet rooms, standing before icons, whispering words to God. They were sincere. They believed. They asked for help, for guidance, for relief from suffering. Their prayers were real, but something was wrong. Their prayers moved differently. Instead of rising easily, the words struggled upward, heavy, labored, as though dragging invisible weight behind them. The souls felt this too, though they could not name it. Prayer felt like work. Faith felt exhausting. God seemed distant, not because he had withdrawn, but because something unseen stood between the soul and heaven. The vision sharpened. Padre Pio now saw what the souls themselves could not see. Each person carried weight on their shoulders. Not physical weight, spiritual weight. It pressed down constantly, invisible but real, affecting everything. Posture bent slightly forward. Breathing felt restricted. Prayer required effort where it should have flowed freely. These souls did not know they carried anything. They assumed everyone felt this way. They thought prayer was supposed to be difficult. They believed spiritual life naturally required constant strain. The vision focused on a single soul. A woman praying in a dim room, alone, faithful, trying to reach God with words that felt too heavy to speak. Padre Pio saw her clearly. She was not living in grave sin. She was not distant from God. She attended Mass regularly. She prayed daily. She meant every word. And yet, her prayers barely moved. Padre Pio looked closer. He saw the weight she carried. It was not one thing. It was many small things, layered over time, accumulated without her awareness. But she could not see them. And because she could not see them, she could not understand why prayer felt so heavy. The vision paused. Padre Pio waited. Heaven did not explain. It only showed. Something was attached to this woman's soul. Multiple somethings. Invisible threads connecting her to moments she no longer remembered. Each thread pulled. Each thread added pressure. But what were they? Padre Pio could not tell. He only saw the effect. The weight. The struggle. The exhaustion. Nothing moved. The vision widened. Padre Pio saw that this woman was not unique. Thousands of souls carried similar weight. Most had no idea why prayer felt heavy. They assumed it was their fault. They wondered if they lacked faith. They questioned whether God still heard them. They blamed themselves for struggling. And the more they blamed themselves, the heavier the weight became. Padre Pio felt something tighten in his chest. The cycle fed itself. The souls could not see what they carried, so they carried guilt for not understanding. The guilt added weight. The weight made prayer harder. The harder prayer became, the more they blamed themselves. He watched them pray harder, longer, more desperately. It made no difference. The weight remained. Then Padre Pio saw something else. The woman was not only carrying what she could not see, she was carrying what she believed about herself because of it. She believed she was spiritually weak. She believed God found her unworthy. She believed prayer was difficult because she was doing something wrong. None of this was true, but the weight made it feel true. The vision shifted. Padre Pio watched the woman's daily life. She woke tired. She prayed tired. She attended Mass tired. She tried to read scripture tired. Everything spiritual felt like pushing uphill. She saw others who seemed to find faith easy, natural, joyful. She wondered what was wrong with her. And the wondering added more weight. Padre Pio saw her begin to avoid prayer. Not consciously, not defiantly, but slowly, subtly. She delayed it. She shortened it. She distracted herself. Because prayer had become associated with failure, with heaviness, with the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Still, she did not stop completely. She kept trying, but each attempt felt harder than the last. The vision deepened. Padre Pio now saw another soul. A man this time, younger, praying in a church after work. He felt the same heaviness. He did not know why. He assumed it was normal. Padre Pio watched him. This man prayed often. He was sincere. He wanted to be close to God. But every time he prayed, he felt resistance. Not from God, from something inside himself. He could not name it. He had felt this way for years. So long that he no longer questioned it. He simply assumed spiritual life was supposed to feel this difficult. Padre Pio saw what this man carried too. Multiple things. Layered. Invisible. each one adding pressure he could not identify, but one stood out. This weight was different from the others, heavier, more specific. It pressed against a particular part of his soul. When he prayed for certain things, the resistance became unbearable. When he asked God for peace in relationships, the words died in his throat. When he prayed for reconciliation, nothing moved. He did not know why. He thought God was withholding something. He thought his faith was too weak. He thought he was being tested. But Padre Pio saw it was not a test. It was something else. Something this man had done, or not done, or said, or not said. But what? The vision paused again. Padre Pio waited. The silence stretched longer this time. Heaven was preparing to show him something deeper. Not an explanation yet. Something stranger first. His breathing slowed. The room felt heavier. And then the vision resumed, but differently now. Padre Pio saw the woman again. But this time, heaven showed him something he had not seen before. A moment from her past. 10 years ago. Her mother dying. The hospital room dim. The woman kneeling beside the bed, whispering through tears. Padre Pio could not hear the words. But he saw what happened next. Her mother lived through the night. The woman felt relief, gratitude, something close to joy. For 3 days after, something in her changed. She moved differently, spoke differently, carried herself differently. Then normal life returned. A headache came. She complained. A bill arrived. She grumbled. A conflict arose. She vented. And in that moment, Padre Pio saw something flicker. A small change in the spiritual atmosphere around her. One of the invisible threads attached to her soul pulled tighter. She did not notice. But her soul noticed. Every time she complained after that, the thread pulled tighter. Not because God was punishing her, but because something inside her recognized a contradiction she could not consciously see. Padre Pio still did not understand what he was seeing, but he felt its weight. The vision shifted again. The man, 5 years ago, a broken relationship, a brother who would not speak to him, the pain unbearable. In that pain, the man had knelt and whispered something into the silence. Padre Pio could not hear that either, but he saw what happened next. The year ended. The brother still did not speak. The man had wanted to act. He had meant to act, but fear stopped him. Then busyness. Then pride. And slowly, quietly, the whole thing slipped from his conscious memory. But something in his soul remembered. And that something created the heaviest weight this man carried. Padre Pio watched. Every time this man prayed for relationships, this weight pressed harder. Every time he asked for reconciliation, the resistance grew. He was asking for something while carrying something that blocked it, but he did not know what. And because he did not know, he could not remove it. The vision paused one more time. Padre Pio felt heaven preparing to reveal something crucial. Not just what these souls carried, but where it came from. The silence was longer this time, heavier, as though the answer itself had weight. Then heaven showed him. Padre Pio watched the moment a soul whispers words to God in desperation. Not just any words. Specific words. Words that offer something. Words that bind. The woman, years earlier, kneeling in fear. If you heal my child, I will give something back. The man, kneeling in pain. Before the year ends. Padre Pio saw what happened in the spiritual realm when these words were spoken. They did not dissolve. They were received, not as commands, not as negotiations, but as offerings. Free offerings made by a free soul. And because they were free, they remained. The soul had offered something. Heaven had accepted the intention. Not to bind, not to trap, but to honor the will. When a soul gives its word and keeps it, something flows. Grace moves both ways. The relationship deepens. The soul grows stronger. But when the word is given and then abandoned, the flow stops. Not because heaven withdraws, but because the soul has divided itself. It asked for something while offering something else. It received the first. It forgot the second. And that forgetting created the weight. Padre Pio felt the truth settle into him. But it did not bring relief. It brought a different kind of pressure. Because now he saw what these souls had done. And he saw that most of them would never remember doing it. The vision revealed another layer. Padre Pio saw that modern souls do this constantly. In moments of fear, desperation, gratitude, they whisper half-formed words. They offer things without thinking. They make inner commitments they abandon within hours. Each one leaves a mark. Each one creates pressure. And over time, the pressure accumulates into something the soul can no longer ignore but still cannot understand. Padre Pio watched the woman's life unfold backward. She had done this 17 times over 20 years. 17 moments where she whispered something to God, meant it sincerely, then let it slip away. She remembered none of them, but her soul carried all 17. The weight was not punishment, it was memory, the soul remembering what the mind had erased. And because the mind did not remember, the soul suffered alone. The vision shifted again. Padre Pio now saw what happens when a soul accidentally stumbles back into one of these lost moments. The woman was praying. Suddenly, unexpectedly, a memory surfaced. Sharp, clear. Years ago, she had whispered something about visiting someone. She had meant it. She had acted on it twice. Then stopped. She had completely forgotten. But the moment she remembered, something changed. The weight did not lift, but it shifted. She could feel it now. Not as vague heaviness, but as something specific. Something she could name. And because she could name it, she could choose. She could fulfill it late. She could release it honestly. She could acknowledge it and ask to be freed. Any of these would begin to dissolve the weight. But if she dismissed the memory, if she justified it away, if she buried it again intentionally, the weight would not stay the same. It would double. Padre Pio watched her hesitate. She did not act immediately. She did not even pray about it that day. But the awareness remained. And awareness was the first movement toward freedom. But not the last. Then heaven showed him something darker. Another soul. Another memory surfacing. This soul remembered clearly. A moment years ago. Words whispered in crisis. Specific words. The memory came during prayer. Clear. Unavoidable. And the soul dismissed it. That was a long time ago. Things are different now. I was being unrealistic. The justification came smoothly. Practiced. The memory was buried again. This time, intentionally. Padre Pio watched the weight double instantly. Heaven did not explain why. It only showed. A forgotten thing creates weight. A remembered thing that is refused creates something worse. The first is forgetfulness. The second is rejection. And rejection hardens the soul in ways that forgetfulness cannot. The soul did not realize what it had done. It thought it was being reasonable. It thought it was freeing itself. But it had locked itself from the inside. And this time, the key was no longer just remembering. It required something deeper. Something more costly. Nothing moved. The vision widened. Padre Pio saw thousands of souls now. Some carried one forgotten thing. Some carried dozens. Some had carried them so long the weight felt permanent. They could not imagine prayer without struggle. They could not imagine faith without exhaustion. And then he saw others. Souls whose prayers moved easily. Not because they were holier. Not because they were stronger. But because they were unblocked. They had either kept their words or released them honestly. Either path worked. But both required one thing heaven would not provide for them. Awareness. The vision paused one final time. Padre Pio felt heaven preparing to show him the way through. Not for every soul. Not as a formula. But as a possibility. The silence stretched. His heart beat slower. Something was about to be offered. But Padre Pio sensed it came with a cost he could not yet see. Then he saw it. A man kneeling. Praying. His prayers had felt heavy for years. He did not know why. He had tried everything. Longer prayers. More devotion. Stricter discipline. Nothing worked. Then, quietly, without drama, he spoke different words. If I offered you something I no longer remember, I release it now. I cannot recall what it was. But you do. Free me from what I can no longer fulfill. That was all. Padre Pio watched heaven respond. Not with spectacle. Not with immediate relief. But with movement. Slowly, steadily, the weight began to shift. Not disappear. Not vanish completely. But loosen. The things this man had spoken and abandoned, now acknowledged without being fully remembered, lost their grip. He had not recalled specifics. But he had stopped pretending they did not exist. And that shift was enough for heaven to begin. But only begin. Padre Pio saw what came next. The loosening was not the end. It was the start of something harder. Because once the weight began to move, the soul had to choose whether to let it go or tighten its grip again. And that choice came with cost. Most souls, Padre Pio saw, would feel the weight loosen and panic. They would reach back for it, not because they wanted the burden, but because the burden had become familiar. And the soul fears losing what it knows, even when what it knows is pain. The vision showed him one more thing. Souls who learned this and misused it. They began speaking words to God carelessly. They thought, if I can release things later, I can offer anything now. Heaven showed what happened. These souls created weight faster than those who forgot innocently. Because careless words create a different kind of burden. A burden that cannot be released by simple acknowledgement. It requires something deeper. Something more costly. True repentance for treating their own word as meaningless. Padre Pio saw one woman in particular. She learned about abandoned words and felt relieved. Finally, an explanation. But instead of becoming more careful, she became reckless. She offered things freely, assuming she could undo them later. Within months, her prayers became unbearable. The weight was crushing. Because this time, she had not forgotten. She had dismissed. And dismissal is mockery, not of God, but of herself. Heaven does not mock. But when a soul mocks itself, heaven cannot intervene until the soul recognizes what it has done. And this woman would not recognize it for years. Padre Pio felt the danger of this moment. The solution carried its own risk. The way out could become a trap if misunderstood. The vision began to fade. Padre Pio remained still. He would never force souls to remember. He would never demand they list everything. But he would offer one quiet suggestion to those who said prayer felt too heavy. Ask if you spoke something you no longer recall. Release what you cannot remember. And see what heaven does. But he would also warn them. Do not use this as permission to be careless. Your word, even when forgotten, still binds you. And the cost of releasing it may be higher than you expect. He sat in silence long after the vision ended. The room felt different now. Not lighter, not heavier, just clear. He saw now why souls struggled. Not because they were weak, not because they were unworthy, but because they had spoken words they could not recall and could not keep. And those words waited, not patiently, not angrily, just waited. Padre Pio returned to prayer, not making new offerings, but keeping old ones, because he saw what others did not. Prayer is easy when the soul keeps its word, and impossible when it does not. The question remained with him, not as an answer, as an invitation. Did I speak something I no longer remember?